Spider Noir is not pretending to be bright, sleek, or conventionally heroic. It is leaning directly into pulp, shadow, smoke, trenchcoat menace, and a city that looks like it has already lost its soul long before the story begins. That is the right move. If you are going to build a live-action series around this version of Spider-Man, you cannot sand off the mood and hope the character survives on brand recognition alone. You need atmosphere. You need weight. You need New York to feel less like a playground and more like a haunted machine. Based on this new trailer, that part seems locked in, and honestly, Nicolas Cage is a huge reason why this works on paper before the show has even premiered. He already gave Spider-Man Noir a memorable voice in the Spider-Verse films, but live action is a different challenge. Voice can sell mystique. Physical presence has to sell gravity. The good news is that Cage has spent years proving he understands exactly how to play characters who exist right on the edge between sincerity and heightened madness. That makes him weirdly perfect for something like Spider Noir. This version of the character cannot feel flat or generic. He has to feel like a man carrying old damage, old rage, and a sense of duty that has outlived whatever peace he might have once had. Cage can do that in his sleep. What makes the trailer more interesting, though, is that the series is not just selling one brooding vigilante in a fedora, it is clearly building a larger criminal ecosystem around him. The footage hints that Ben Reilly's Spider-Man will not simply be fighting random mobsters or one disposable villain of the week. Instead, the show seems to be constructing its own distorted variation of a sinister team, with a lineup that includes Tombstone, Silvermane, Sandman, and Megawatt. That is a smart escalation. It gives the series the scale of comic book mythology without forcing it to abandon its street-level noir identity. And that balance may be the real make-or-break factor for this show, because the danger with Spider Noir is obvious. If it leans too hard into style, it risks becoming empty cosplay with expensive lighting. If it leans too hard into mythology, it risks losing the tight, smoky identity that makes this version of Spider-Man different from every other adaptation. This trailer suggests the show is trying to walk that line carefully. The villains are recognizable enough to excite comic fans, but the presentation still feels rougher, meaner, and more contained than the average multiverse spectacle. That is important. Spider Noir should not feel like Spider-Man with the saturation turned down. It should feel like a completely different storytelling language built around spider imagery. The Ben Reilly angle also gives the series a real point of intrigue. In most mainstream live-action Spider-Man storytelling, Peter Parker is the unavoidable center of gravity. So making Ben Reilly the operative Spider-Man of this world instantly changes the texture. It tells us this show is not interested in just repainting familiar mythology with a noir filter. It wants to reroot the identity of the hero itself. That is a big swing. And if the writing can support it, it gives the series a genuine reason to exist beyond aesthetic novelty. I also think the 1930s setting is doing a lot of heavy lifting here in the best way. Superhero TV has become so dependent on modern visual shorthand that a period setting immediately forces a different rhythm. Technology changes, power structures change, violence changes, corruption becomes less digital and more tactile. A city full of smoke, organized crime, political decay, and old money rot is a perfect place to drop a figure like Spider Noir. The era does half the thematic work for the show before a single punch is thrown. When your hero is already built like a myth walking through a dying city, the setting itself becomes part of the character design. That is why the black and white and color presentation is more than just a cute release gimmick. On the surface, yes, it is a stylish hook and an easy way to make the series stand out. But it also says something more important. It suggests the creators understand that Spider Noir lives in visual language as much as in plot. Black and white is not just nostalgia here. It is identity. It lets the shadows, the costumes, the rain, the silhouettes, and the violence breathe differently. Then the color version gives the audience a second way to process the same world, likely highlighting how production design and comic book energy still matter beneath the monochrome mood. That is actually a very clever way to widen the show's appeal without compromising its concept. The supporting cast also gives the project more muscle than people may realize. Brendan Gleeson as Silvermane sounds like exactly the kind of casting that can anchor a noir world with menace and age. Abraham Popula as Tombstone adds another physical and tonal variation to the threat level. Jack Huston as Sandman is the kind of choice that could go either wonderfully strange or completely off the rails, which honestly is part of the fun. And if Laura Linney's mystery role turns out to matter in a major way, that only adds to the sense that this series is aiming for something more layered than Spider-Man, but old-timey. It is also impossible to ignore the bigger strategic picture. Spider Noir arrives just 2 months before Tom Holland's next Spider-Man film, which makes the timing feel very deliberate. This does not look accidental. It looks like Sony and its partners are testing whether audiences are finally ready to embrace live-action Spider-Man storytelling that is not chained directly to Peter Parker. And if Spider Noir lands, that opens a very interesting door. Suddenly, all those alternate Spider characters that seem to niche or too weird for live action start looking like real possibilities instead of development-room fantasies. That may be why Spider Noir feels more important than a normal streaming spin-off. If it works, it becomes proof of concept, not just for this character, but for an entirely different way of expanding Marvel's Spider Corner on television. A successful first season would not only justify a second one, it would almost demand a broader strategy. Different decades, different cities, different Spider identities, different genres. There is a whole laboratory of possibilities sitting behind this one show if the audience responds. Of course, none of that matters if the series itself does not hold together. A strong trailer can only do so much. Stylish noir imagery is easy to sell in short bursts. Sustaining it across a full season is much harder. The writing has to be sharp. The mystery has to build. The villains have to feel like more than names pulled from a wiki. And Cage, as perfect as he sounds for the role, still needs a script that understands when to let him simmer and when to let him erupt. Those are real challenges. But for now, the trailer is doing exactly what it needs to do. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. This is where these kinds of films come to life. Until the next story, stay curious, be critical, keep your eyes on the screen. And remember, every film you haven't seen is a new film.